Santiago del Carmen Maria, the Queen of Crowning Thoughts.
The recent events in St. Paul, Minnesota, right next door to Minneapolis, have sparked outrage and forced a hard look at hypocrisy in places we least expect it. On a peaceful Sunday morning, a group of determined activists walked into City's church during worship service. They didn't come to destroy or attack anyone physically. They came to speak truth loudly in a space where silence has allowed harm to continue. Here's what happened, step by step, so everyone watching or listening can follow clearly. This church lists David Easterwood as one of its pastors. Public records, court documents from ACLU filings, and matching personal details show this same David Easterwood serves as the acting director of the ICE field office in St. Paul. That office oversees immigration enforcement and removal operations in the region, operations that have drawn widespread criticism for excessive force, unlawful arrests, and now, tragically, a deadly shooting. Just weeks ago, on January 7, 2026, an ICE agent fatally shot Renee Good, a 37-year-old mother of three, during an enforcement action in Minneapolis. Her death ignited protests across the city, with people demanding accountability for what many see as aggressive, dangerous tactics under the current administration's push on immigration. The protesters entering the church were chanting for justice specifically in her name, justice for Renee Good, along with calls like ICE out, and demands for the congregation to confront the reality of their pastor's dual role. Imagine sitting in church, seeking peace and spiritual guidance, only to have the service interrupted by people holding signs and raising their voices. The lead pastor stood at the pulpit. Some congregants stayed seated, others confronted the group. Protesters used whistles, tools communities have used before to alert neighbors about ICE presence, and kept chanting for several minutes, about 23 minutes inside the sanctuary, according to reports. They eventually moved outside into the snow, continuing to call for justice for immigrant neighbors. This wasn't random chaos. Organizers from groups like Black Lives Matter Minnesota, the Racial Justice Network, and others planned it after discovering the connection between the pastor and ICE leadership. They wanted the congregation to know the person teaching about love, compassion, and following Jesus also directs an agency accused of violence and rights violations in the very community where people worship. Let's be direct and fearless here. You cannot preach the gospel on Sunday and oversee policies that tear families apart, use lethal force without full accountability, or enforce laws in ways that many view as cruel and unjust the rest of the week. True Christianity demands consistency. Jesus spoke powerfully about caring for the stranger, the vulnerable, the oppressed. He flipped tables when religious leaders exploited people. He warned that you cannot serve two masters, God and money, or in this case, God and systems built on fear and exclusion. If someone stands in the pulpit sharing messages of grace while directing operations that result in a mother's death and widespread community terror, that contradiction cannot be ignored. It's not about attacking faith. It's about holding leaders accountable when their actions clash with the very teachings they claim to uphold. Protesters weren't there to debate theology. They were exposing a moral disconnect that affects real lives. The response from authorities was swift and severe. The U.S. Department of Justice announced an investigation into the protesters, with promises to press charges and use the full force of federal law. Attorney General statements emphasized protecting houses of worship from disruption. Yet the same level of urgency hasn't always appeared when ICE actions cross lines or when communities demand answers after tragedies like Renee Good's shooting. This incident highlights deeper tensions. The clash between free speech and protest rights versus the sanctity of religious spaces, the role of public servants in private faith communities, and whether enforcement tactics under the current administration respect human dignity. Many see the church disruption as a necessary wake-up call in a time when silence equals complicity. Others view it as crossing a line into sacred ground. Whatever side you stand on, one thing is undeniable. This moment forces us to ask hard questions about integrity, power, and what it truly means to live out values of justice and mercy. When a pastor leads both a congregation and an enforcement office tied to violence, people have every right to demand clarity and change. And then, of course, Mr. Power Grab, the husband of the courts and ICE, did exactly this also. On January 3, United States forces launched a bold military operation inside Venezuela, a sovereign nation. They struck targets in and around Caracas, the capital, and captured President Nicolás Maduro along with his wife, Cilia Flores. They flew them straight to New York to face long-standing drug trafficking and narcoterrorism charges. President Trump then declared that the U.S. would step in to run the country temporarily, oversee its oil resources, and guide a transition. This isn't just another headline. This is a pivotal moment that demands we look closely at what happened, why it matters, and what it means for our country's standing in the world. I'll break it down clearly, step by step, so everyone listening can grasp the full picture. First, understand the buildup. For months leading up to this, tensions had been rising. The U.S. conducted strikes on boats suspected of drug smuggling in the Caribbean, seized oil tankers linked to Venezuela, and built up military presence in the region. The administration framed these as efforts to combat narcotics and terrorism. Maduro had been indicted years ago in U.S. courts on serious charges involving drugs and corruption. Many see him as an authoritarian leader who clung to power despite widespread hardship in Venezuela, economic collapse, mass migration, and accusations of rigged elections. Then came Operation Absolute Resolve. In the early hours of January 3, explosions rocked Caracas. U.S. Special Forces, backed by airstrikes to neutralize defenses, raided a compound and extracted Maduro and his wife. Reports indicate casualties, including security personnel. By morning, Trump announced the capture and said America would manage Venezuela's affairs until a stable handover. He spoke of rebuilding oil infrastructure, securing resources, and ensuring prosperity, while warning of further action if needed. Now, here's where we need to be fearless and direct. This operation raises profound questions about law, power, and accountability. Under the United Nations Charter, a treaty the U.S. helped create and has long championed, nations cannot use military force against another sovereign country's territory or independence without clear self-defense or UN approval. There was no imminent attack on America, no UN Security Council authorization. Legal experts across the spectrum, from scholars to human rights groups, have called this a violation of international law, an act of aggression against a sovereign state. At home, our Constitution is crystal clear. Only Congress has the power to declare war or authorize major military actions. The War Powers Resolution requires the President to notify and seek approval for hostilities unless there's an immediate threat. Here, no prior consultation with Congress happened, no declaration. Some lawmakers from both parties have criticized this as overreach, with calls for oversight and even resolutions to limit involvement. Think about what this means in everyday terms. Imagine if another powerful country sent forces into our cities to remove a leader they disliked, bombed sites, and announced they'd run things for a while. We'd call it an invasion, a breach of our sovereignty. Fairness demands we apply the same standard outward. Principles like respecting borders and resolving disputes peacefully aren't optional. They're what separate rule of law from raw power. President Trump and his team justify this as a law enforcement action to bring an indicted criminal to justice, with military support. They point to Maduro's alleged crimes harming Americans through drugs. And yes, holding leaders accountable for serious wrongdoing is important. But using bombs, raids on foreign soil, and declarations of control crosses into territory that history warns against. It echoes past interventions that promised quick fixes but led to prolonged entanglements, loss of life, and damaged trust worldwide. Right now, Venezuela is in flux. Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's former vice president, has been named acting leader. Some political prisoners have been released, a positive step. Talks of oil deals and transitions are underway. But protests, uncertainty, and international condemnation continue. Nations like China and Russia have demanded Maduro's release. Allies express concern over precedents. This is our breaking point as a nation. If a president can unilaterally launch military actions into another country, seize its leader, and claim oversight without Congress or clear legal grounding, what limits remain on executive power? Accountability isn't about partisanship. It's about upholding the checks and balances that make America strong. Congress has tools: investigations, resolutions under the War Powers Act, and yes, impeachment for grave breaches of constitutional duty or international obligations. We cannot wait. Silence risks normalizing actions that erode our moral authority and invite chaos globally. Leaders must face consequences when they violate core laws, whether domestic or international. This isn't about celebrating or condemning one person. It's about defending the rules that protect all nations, including ours. America stands tallest when we lead by example, respecting sovereignty, pursuing justice through lawful means, and letting Congress fulfill its role. The world is watching. It's time for bold action to restore balance and integrity. If this message spoke to you, even just a little, stay connected with me by following. Your support truly matters more than you realize, and every moment you take to listen is deeply appreciated. Please leave a like on this video and share your thoughts in the comments after hearing the story. Follow and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Your support keeps the space alive. It costs nothing, yet it means everything to me. Showing love through engagement helps me continue creating, speaking truth, and showing up consistently. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, for supporting, and for standing with me. Crowning Thoughts True Speaker Copyright 2025 by Santiago D.C. Maria, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution. I love you all. I appreciate every one of you, and I thank you for your time. Stay blessed.